The skill that we're going to focus on right now is using rate and ratio tables. They're the same thing. Inside of this table, which is just an organized way of looking at numbers, you're actually going to see lots of connections and relationships with the numbers inside. For example, the one I immediately noticed right off the bat is when they usually give you one from each side, right, with each other. So I look at each side, I have the top side and bottom side. The top side is focused in on the miles that were biked, and then the bottom side is focused on how many days it took them to bike those miles. If you look at this first ratio, you have a ratio of 30 miles in 6 days if you want to pull that ratio out of that table. But if you realize and recognize what is the connection between 30 and 6, between multiplication and division, is actually that's 6 times 5 is 30. Now I like to draw my arrows to know which direction that's going, so I can keep track of that because I'm going to start to develop a pattern here. Well, what that tells me is that all of the bottom numbers should multiply times 5 to get the top row. And if you're going the other way, you should divide by 5. But one of the things that we talk about in class is if you look at the numbers up here, they don't have much in common with 30. So I'm going to jump down to the 6. And so I'm going to start looking side to side and see, does 6 have any common connections with these numbers? The most common one I see is 2. And if I look at how 6 and 2 are connected, I know that 6 divided by 3 is 2. That's the common fact, math facts that we use in the terms we use in 6th grade. So 6 divided by 2 equals 3, which means that this column, these boxes are going to be 3 times smaller than these ones. So I'm going to do the same thing with my 30. I'm going to divide by 3. I'm going to get 10. And if you think about it, 2 times 3 is 6, and 10 times 3 is 30, and that's an equivalent ratio as well. Now, 6 doesn't really have much in common with 20, so I'm going to use my 2 now as my helper. And I notice that 2 times 10 is 20. And I'm going to take the partner of 2, which is 10. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to times that by 10 as well, since I did down here, and I'm going to get 100. If I look at my bottom to top relationship, times 5, times 5, times 5, I'm in a good spot. Now, looking back at 2, I wonder how he connects with 1. Well, the relationship is that 1 is half of 2. So I'm going to divide 2 by 2 and get 1. And I'm going to divide 10 by 2 and get 5. There's my top relationship with my bottom again of times 5. One thing I could do here is know that this number is missing. It could be x. X times 5, what would that be? Well, that would be 8. Or you could also look back at 5 and say, well, 5 times 8 here is 40. So 1 times 8 here would be 8. And that's pretty nice. And actually, we were lucky enough to find our unit rate in here as well, 1 to 5, which means I can bike 5 miles in 1 day. And that's the go-to unit rate that we would use for this scenario. If you look at this one down here, I look at my very first relationship, I notice 2 and 9, and I notice they do not have anything in common. So instead of looking up and down for this relationship, I'm going to look left to right. And I notice that 2 and 6 have a common connection, and that's times 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So I'm going to take my 9, and I'm going to times that by 3 and get 27. Well, if I look at this now, what's connected to 1? Well, 2 is twice the size of 1, so if I take 2 and divide that by 2, I get 1. Well, 9 divided by 2, you're like, ooh, yeah, that doesn't look good. So you may find yourself with a decimal in here. 9 divided by 2 is 4.5. And now I realize I have two 27s up here, and that wouldn't make any sense. So why don't we just change this one real quick to 45? What number up here has the most to do with 45? I'd probably say 9, because 9 is a factor of 45. 9 times 5 is 45. So that means 2 times 5 is 10, which means I could bike 10 miles or run 45 miles in 10 hours. But our unit rate means I can run 4.5 miles in 1 hour. And if I look at my next connection, if I doubled it and went to 2 hours, I should be able to double the miles I ran as well.